The door was locked from the inside. No key was found. There was no struggle heard by the guests in the adjacent rooms. Yet, inside that cramped, dimly lit space of the hotel president, a man lay dying in a pool of his own blood, his body broken in ways that suggested a calculated, rhythmic torture. But here is the part that keeps investigators awake nearly a century later. As he took his final, gasping breaths, he looked the detectives in the eye and insisted that nobody had hurt him. He claimed he had simply fallen against the bathtub, but the medical examiner found something far more sinister: ligature marks on his neck, wrists, and ankles. He had been bound. He had been stabbed. And through it all, he was protecting his killer. This is the mystery of Roland T. Owen, a man who didn't exist. A murder that shouldn't have been possible, and evidence that, to this very day, remains a haunting defiance of logic. Welcome to Midnight Crime Vault, Kansas City, January 2nd, 1935. The winter air was a jagged blade, cutting through the heavy overcoats of travelers seeking refuge in the bustling downtown district. At approximately 1:20 p.m., a tall, husky man with a cauliflower-era telltale sign of a prizefighter and a distinct scar on the side of his head walked into the hotel president. He carried no luggage, only a small comb and a toothbrush in his pocket. He checked in under the name Roland T. Owen, listing his home as Los Angeles. He requested an interior room on one of the upper floors, away from the street noise. He was assigned room 1046. To the bellboy, Randolph Probst, Owen seemed uneasy, almost vibrating with a quiet internal tension. When they reached the room, Owen took his toothbrush and comb out, placed them on the sink, and then did something strange. He sat in the corner of the room, in total darkness, staring at the door. He didn't turn on the lights. He didn't take off his coat. He just sat there, waiting for a world that seemed to be closing in on him. The environment of the hotel president was one of classic 1930s elegance, but room 1046 felt isolated, a concrete box tucked away in the labyrinth of the 10th floor. As the afternoon turned into evening, a maid named Mary Soptic arrived to clean the room. She found the door locked from the outside, assuming Owen had left. However, when she used her master key, she found him sitting in the same spot in the same darkness. The only light came from a small desk lamp. Owen appeared distressed, or perhaps terrified. He told Mary to leave the door unlocked because he was expecting a friend. His voice was a low, gravelly rasp. When Mary returned later with fresh towels, the room was still dark, but now Owen was sprawled across the bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. A note on the desk read, "Doan, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait. But Doan never seemed to arrive while anyone was looking, and the atmosphere in room 1046 grew heavier with every passing hour. The next morning, Mary returned. The door was locked from the outside, a feat that required a key Owen supposedly didn't have. Inside, the room was silent. When she entered, she saw Owen lying on the bed, still in the dark. The telephone rang. Owen answered it and said, "No, Doan, I don't want to eat. I'm not hungry. I just had breakfast." Then he repeated, "No, I'm not hungry." The strange part? There was no food in the room. No room service had been ordered. The tension escalated when Mary returned once more that afternoon with more towels. She heard two men talking inside. When she knocked, a deep, harsh voice, not Owen's, shouted, "Who is it?" When she explained she had towels, the voice barked, "We don't need any." Mary knew the hotel was out of towels for that floor, but the aggression in that voice chilled her to the bone. She retreated, leaving the secrets of room 1046 behind the heavy oak door. As night fell on January 3rd, the hotel's switchboard operator noticed the phone in room 1046 was off the hook. A bellboy was sent up to check. He found the door locked with a "Do Not Disturb" sign hanging limply. He knocked, but no one answered. He shouted through the wood, "Put the phone back on the hook." A muffled voice replied, "Okay," but the phone never moved. Hours later, another bellboy, Randolph Probst, went up. He used his passkey and found a scene from a nightmare. The room was a slaughterhouse. Blood was splattered on the walls, the bed, and the ceiling. Owen was on his knees, his head in his hands, barely conscious. When the lights were finally flicked on, the horror was revealed in full. Owen had been stabbed multiple times. His skull had been fractured by a heavy object. His neck bore the deep purple bruising of a garrote. Yet when the police arrived and asked who did this, Owen whispered his final lie, "Nobody. He died shortly after at the hospital. But the investigation was only beginning, and it would lead into a void where names were fake, ghosts were real, and the evidence made no sense. Detectives searched the room but found something impossible. All of Owen's belongings were gone. His toothbrush, his comb, his clothes, everything had vanished. There were no knives, no weapons, and most importantly, no key. How did the killer lock the door from the outside and then make the key disappear? Why were there no fingerprints other than Owen's in a room where a violent struggle had clearly taken place? The mystery deepened when they realized Roland T. Owen was a pseudonym. No such person existed in Los Angeles. To understand the gravity of this void, we must look at the physical layout of the crime scene. The room was 10 by 12 feet. The window was closed. The door was the only exit. If Owen had been tortured for hours, how did no one hear the screams? The walls of the president were thick, but not soundproof. A woman in room 1048 later claimed she heard voices, a man and a woman, arguing about finding him. But she couldn't be sure if it was 1046. The police were baffled. They had a victim who refused to name his killer, a crime scene stripped of every personal effect, and a locked door mystery that seemed to defy the laws of physics. They checked every lead. They checked the Doan mentioned in the note. They checked the passenger manifests of trains coming from Los Angeles. Nothing. The trail went cold until a funeral was planned for the unidentified man. Just before he was to be buried in a potter's field, an anonymous donor sent money for a lavish funeral and a floral arrangement with a card that read, "Love Forever Lucille." Shortly after, a woman named Ruby Ogletree saw a newspaper sketch of the dead man and screamed. It was her son, Artemis Ogletree. He had left home months earlier. But Ruby had been receiving letters from him after his death letters that were typed, even though Artemis didn't know how to type. Who was Doan? Who was Lucille? Why did Artemis allow himself to be tortured and killed without uttering a single name of his assailant? Let's dive deeper into the abyss of the Ogletree family history. Artemis was a young man from Birmingham, Alabama. He was described as kind, but perhaps too trusting. He left home in 1934 to see the world. When his mother started receiving those typed letters, she was suspicious but wanted to believe her son was alive. One letter claimed he was sailing to Egypt. Another said he was working in a private club. But the timeline was impossible. The letters were mailed from locations Artemis could not have reached in the time specified. This suggests that whoever killed Artemis was not just a murderer but a puppeteer. They were mocking the family, creating a digital ghost in an analog age. The level of premeditation here is staggering. To kill a man is one thing. To assume his identity to keep his family at bay suggests a level of organization that points toward organized crime or a very sophisticated psychopath. But why the President Hotel? Why Kansas City? Some theorists suggest Artemis had stumbled into a high-stakes gambling ring. His cauliflower ear suggested a history in the ring. Perhaps he was a fall guy for a fixed fight. If he owed money to the wrong people, the torture in room 1046 wasn't just a punishment, it was a message. But to whom? If the door was locked from the outside, the killer had to have a key. The hotel staff were questioned repeatedly. Did a maid leave her key unattended? Did a bellhop take a bribe? The mystery of the key is the linchpin of the case. In 1930s hotel management, keys were heavy, brass, and meticulously tracked. For a killer to exit, lock the door, and then vanish without being seen on a floor with active guests and staff is a feat of professional-level stealth. And then there is the matter of the missing clothes. Why take them? To prevent identification, certainly. But they also took the toothbrush, the comb. Even the labels from the carpet were supposedly scrutinized. They wanted Artemis Ogletree to be a no one. They wanted him to disappear into the ether. But the Lucille floral arrangement suggests a personal connection, a woman who loved him, or perhaps a woman who was the catalyst for his execution. Was Lucille the woman heard arguing in the hallway? Was she the one who sent the money, guilt-ridden over the brutal end of a man she knew? The police eventually tracked the money for the funeral to a local floral shop. But the person who placed the order did so over the phone, using a voice that was refined and calm. No one ever came forward. No one ever claimed the body except for the mother who lived states away. The case of room 1046 isn't just a murder. It's a riddle wrapped in blood and shadow, a story where every answer only breeds more terrifying questions. Think about the psychological state of Artemis in his final moments. He is lying there, ribs broken, lungs punctured, neck bruised. And he tells the police he fell against the tub. That is not just fear. That is a code of silence. That is the behavior of someone who knows that if he speaks, something worse than death will happen, perhaps to his mother, perhaps to someone else he loves. He died a martyr for a secret we will never know. Even now, the halls of the hotel president are said to carry the faint, rasping echo of a man who refused to tell the truth. What was so terrifying that death was preferable to betrayal? What secret was worth the price of such a brutal end? This case stands as a monument to the unknown, a dark stain on the history of true crime that refuses to be washed away by time. It challenges our understanding of victimology and leaves us staring into the same darkness Artemis Ogletree sat in for 3 days. The silence of room 1046 is a silence that screams. We must also consider the strange man seen by a city worker named Robert Lane. On the night of the murder, Lane was stopped by a man who looked exactly like Owen, running down the street in his undershirt, despite the freezing weather. The man had a deep gash on his arm and was frantically trying to hail a taxi. Was this Artemis trying to escape, only to be caught and brought back to the room for his final execution? If so, who was powerful enough to drag a grown man back into a hotel and kill him without anyone noticing? The logistics are staggering. Every piece of evidence, the phone off the hook, the Doan note, the anonymous funeral, points to a conspiracy of silence that spans from Alabama to Missouri. As we close the vault on this chapter, the questions remain. Was the killer still in the room when the bellboy knocked? Did the mysterious Doan walk out in plain sight, wearing Artemis's clothes? Or is the truth something far more complex, hidden in the layers of a life Artemis tried to leave behind? Could it be that the man in the room wasn't even the real Artemis for the first few days? Some suggest an imposter checked in first to set the stage. The possibilities are endless, and each is more haunting than the last. Thank you for descending into the darkness with us. This case remains one of the most studied and least understood in the annals of American crime. It reminds us that even in a world of fingerprints and photographs, a man can become a ghost in the span of a single weekend. If you crave more mysteries that defy explanation and stories that haunt the psyche, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support keeps the Midnight Crime Vault open and allows us to keep digging for the truth in the world's coldest corners. Now I want to hear from you in the comments below. Who do you think was in that room with him? Was it a professional hit or a personal vendetta? Do you believe Lucille was a friend or a foe? And most importantly, why did he take the secret to his grave? Tell us your theories. No matter how wild they might seem in this case, the truth is likely wilder than any fiction. Until next time, keep your doors locked and stay curious. This is Midnight Crime Vault, signing off into the shadows. Stay safe if you can. Subscribe now for more chilling deep dives into the world's most baffling cold cases. We are just getting started and there are many more vaults left to open.